Welcome to meeting number 10 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Human Resources, Skills, and Social Development and the Status of Persons with Disabilities. Pursuant to orders of reference of March 24th, April 11th, and April 20th, 2020, the committee is meeting for the purpose of receiving evidence concerning matters related to the government's response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Today's meeting is taking place by video conference, and the proceedings will be made available via the House of Commons website. The webcast will always show the person speaking rather than the entirety of the committee. In order to facilitate the work of our interpreters and ensure an orderly meeting, I would like to outline a few rules to follow. First, and this is especially important for the witnesses, I think most of the MPs have the hang of it now, but interpretation in the video conference will work much like a regular committee meeting. You have the choice at the bottom of your screen of either floor, English, or French. In order to resolve sound issues, please ensure that you're on the English channel when speaking English and on the French channel when speaking French. If you plan to alternate from one language to the other, please also switch the interpretation channel so it aligns with the language that you're speaking. Before speaking, please wait until I recognize you by name. When you're ready to speak, please click on the microphone to activate your mic. A reminder that all comments by members and witnesses should be addressed through the chair. Should members, and this is for members, and by now you would all be aware of it, if you need to request the floor outside of your designated time, for example, to raise a point of order, you should simply activate your mic and indicate that you have a point of order. If anyone wishes to speak to a point of order that's been raised by another member, they should use the raise hand function. When speaking, please speak slowly and clearly. When not speaking, your mic should be on mute. The use of headsets is strongly encouraged, and our level of compliance is getting much better, which is also encouraging. But if you do have a microphone on your headset that hangs down, make sure it's not rubbing on your shirt during your questioning time. Should any technical challenges arise, for example, in relation to interpretation, or if you're accidentally disconnected, please advise the chair or the clerk immediately, and the technical team will work to resolve them. Please note that we may need to suspend during these times, as we need to ensure all members are able to participate fully. So before we get started, if everyone can click on the screen in the top right-hand corner to make sure that they're in gallery view. With that view, you'll be able to see all of the participants in a grid, and they will all video participants will be able to see one another. With that, I would now like to thank the witnesses for joining us here today. With us, we have from Durham College, Mary Kim Oliver, Vice President, Student Affairs. From Universities Canada, Paul Davidson, President and CEO, as well as Wendy Terrian, Director, External Relations and Research. From the Waterloo Undergraduate Student Association, we have Megan Town, Vice President, Education, as well as Matthew Garretts, outgoing Vice President, Education. As a reminder for members, today's witnesses were asked to keep their opening remarks to a maximum of 5 minutes, because I know that our members are a very curious lot and they have lots of questions. Ms. Oliver, please proceed with your opening remarks. You have 5 minutes.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to join you. I'm here representing our president, Don Lavisa, today, who's unfortunately on another call like this. And I tried to just give you an overview of our current circumstance and profile. So Durham College currently enrolls over 13,000 post-secondary and apprenticeship students in programs at our Oshawa and Whitby campuses. This includes over 1,500 international students. The college also operates employment services sites at 4 locations throughout the region. Colleges in Ontario have over 50 years of experience delivering post-secondary education within the local communities and providing accessible education to a wide range of students. Hands-on learning and skills development are embedded in programs to ensure that graduates are well prepared to enter the workforce with relevant and up-to-date skills. A focus on accessible education means that the student population is a diverse microcosm of the local and global communities that colleges serve. At Durham College, the student population includes students who are Crown Wards, students with disabilities, which is approximately 15% of our total student population, including students with learning disabilities, physical disabilities, and mental health issues. We have second career students who are retraining after job loss or injury. We have students who are dependent on financial aid, single parents, academic upgrading students who are completing secondary school programs and college credits simultaneously, Indigenous student population, and international students, of which approximately 17% of our students are international. The move to online platforms for delivery of the final weeks of the winter semester was accomplished in record time and with great success. Students, faculty, and staff were creative, they were persistent, and they were dedicated to finding solutions. However, the transition did not come without significant challenges and learning opportunities. The current COVID-19 pandemic has had wide-ranging impact on college students as programs move to online delivery, campuses closed, and opportunities for employment and experiential learning stopped. So as of mid-March, our apprenticeship programs were suspended. Field placement, internships, and cooperative education jobs that could not be completed virtually are now incomplete. Programs requiring laboratory or studio work that could not be completed virtually are pending completion. So approximately 15% of our students have been unable to complete their semester as of today's date, and that's delayed graduation for many. And students with learning disabilities really struggled to move into the virtual platforms, and faculty struggled to convert to virtual delivery that was accessible. So significantly, though, the disruption to students' lives was more impactful in other areas. I believe it's widely known that 1 in 5 Canadian students live with mental health challenges, and the majority of post-secondary students with mental health needs access mental health supports through their campuses. While campuses have continued to provide support virtually, students report difficulty finding confidential space when the family's at home. They report escalating mental health challenges related to the new life challenges that all of us are facing. There are a lot of feelings of isolation or of feeling trapped in environments where their mental health issues may have originated. And the limitations on virtual care have been very deeply felt. Other students with disabilities have reported struggling to adapt quickly to a virtual delivery mode for their coursework and difficulty adapting their accommodations to the virtual environment. Students with children or senior parents struggle to attend virtual classes and manage childcare or elder care when there are not options outside the home. Campus food banks are not accessible, and local food banks are facing supply challenges. Our Indigenous students often have limited access to internet, and it's created additional barriers to completion of courses and being able to maintain social contacts. Our international students who did not return to their home countries experience isolation, the financial strain of staying in Canada longer than expected, and the uncertainty of how or if they will be able to complete programs if they did leave Canada. Many students were laid off from their part-time jobs and have been unable to start summer work because they're employed in industries that are closed. And 70% of Durham College students receive financial aid. With the semester ending in April and lack of employment, many of them do not have resources for rent or food. Students who are still employed tend to work in industries such as healthcare, grocery stores, or elder care, and feel the pressure of being at risk of infection and transmission to families. And finally, our students continue to seek campus support for issues related to escalating incidents of domestic violence, assistance with landlords who threaten eviction or even deportation, and racially motivated incidents related to COVID-19. Government programs that have been created to support students are welcome, particularly those announced over the past week or so, but they can't bridge the gaps that the level of disruption have created for our community and the associated uncertainty of the future. So in short, the current pandemic has shone a light on how critically important it is the role of colleges in providing not only education, but the social supports to thousands of students. It also highlights the fundamental need to build a resilient post-secondary system that's nimble and can be sustained through a global crisis. So going forward, to wrap this up, colleges, like so many other organizations, are significantly challenged financially as a result of refunding fees, stopped programs, declines in enrollment. So we're going to be seeking support going forward to meet the following challenges. The education and training of all employees, this is faculty and staff, in more effective use of technologies that are universally accessible to deliver programs and services in as robust a manner as possible, both in campus site settings and virtually. We want the identification and advocacy for options to ensure that all students and employees have access to robust and reliable internet services, regardless of their location and economic resources. Advocacy for employer support to create new jobs that are flexible in delivery methods and to ensure sustainable employment for students. Advocacy for research into more effective ways to reduce the need for escalating mental health supports in favor of proactive measures that build resilience and well-being for all, and advocacy for more effective mental health supports for those who need them. And finally, advocacy for enhanced financial resources for students who cannot be employed or whose education may be disrupted again by COVID-19 spread, and effective mechanisms for accessing these supports. Thank you for your time and for listening today.
Thank you, Ms. Oliver. Next, we have Universities Canada. I believe Mr. Davidson.
Yes, good afternoon, and thank you very much for the opportunity to appear with you. I really appreciate this, and it's really good to see members of Parliament working so hard in this virtual way. So thank you for the opportunity to appear and for the extraordinary work that you're all doing as you fight the pandemic. With me today is Wendy Terrier, and she is our Director of Public Affairs, and I'm just wrestling with my technology a moment. There we go. This should work now. So I think most members know that Universities Canada represents all 95 universities in Canada, and taken together, Canada's universities are a $35 billion a year enterprise and are significant drivers of economic prosperity. They provide employment for over 300,000 people and are the talent engine for Canada. I want to echo and applaud the remarks of the previous speaker because colleges and universities are working together on these issues. Canada's universities are an integral part of the Team Canada approach to the COVID-19 pandemic, to mitigating the risk, to finding a cure, and accelerating Canada's economy into recovery. In just 10 days, universities moved about 1.4 million students online to finish the semester. Universities are conducting COVID-19 related research, donating equipment. They've repurposed dormitories to house frontline healthcare workers and are converting research labs to testing facilities as they step up to serve in the national response. We deeply appreciate that the government has recreated Canada's social safety net in just a matter of weeks and injected record liquidity to keep the economy moving. We're particularly pleased to see the $9 billion investment in support measures announced for students earlier this month, including the Canada Emergency Student Benefit, the changes to student financial aid, and support for job opportunities and volunteer service. These measures are essential to helping young people through the pandemic, ensuring they can continue their studies in the fall and contribute over their lifetimes to building a stronger Canada. However, for students to succeed, universities also need to be strong. And like most sectors of the economy, universities have been profoundly impacted by the pandemic. One of the biggest sources of revenue for Canadian universities and their communities is international student revenue. They contribute more to Canada's economy than the export of softwood, more than the export of wheat, and more than the export of auto parts. And they contribute $6 billion in tuition revenue to universities annually. For many institutions, international students contribute over 50% of tuition revenues. With closed borders and closed visa application centers, we can anticipate significantly lower international student enrollment this fall. The loss of these revenues will directly impact all students and the ability of universities to meet the needs of Canadian students. In addition, universities have had to wind down non-essential research and massively reduce on-campus activities, creating a difficult fiscal situation for the institutions and including job losses. We've been working with federal officials to develop a range of measures that will help support students, stabilize university operations, and contribute to economic recovery. For example, we are proposing a direct federal transfer or other mechanism to help universities bridge their operations until borders are open and international student visa processing returns to normal levels. There's every chance that Canada will emerge stronger in international education post-pandemic, but the loss of revenues could be catastrophic, and Canada needs those students to meet our labor force and immigration goals. With the fall session set to begin in a few short months, we know that there is considerable anxiety among students and parents. 60% of students surveyed said they would prefer an online study option in September, even if health authorities deemed it safe to return to campus. Universities need urgent federal support to undertake large-scale digital transformation to meet the needs of students. This includes the transition from in-person courses to accessible, high-quality online or hybrid courses, major upgrades to university IT infrastructure to ensure universities are able to deliver academic support, career counseling, and mental health measures online, supports to help with skilling, reskilling, and upskilling for the millions of Canadians without work who are looking now to enhance their skills. For students to succeed, universities must be strong. Federal supports to stabilize universities will help ensure that we are able to accelerate Canada and Canadians into recovery. Thank you again for the opportunity to appear.
Thank you, Mr. Davidson. Next, from the Waterloo Undergraduate Student Association, is it Ms. Town?
Yes. Good evening, Mr. Casey and distinguished parliamentarians. I thank you for the opportunity to appear before you. I am the Vice President Education for the Waterloo Undergraduate Student Association, WUSA, and my predecessor, Matthew Garretts, joins me today to speak on behalf of the undergraduates of Research-Intensive Universities, or UCRU. I would particularly like to commend Ms. Oliver for her statements, which covered the wide array of concerns that students are facing, and I'll focus now on students' financial concerns. I'd like to express gratitude for the government's actions to support Canadian students, as well as to Parliament and the wide array of members who showed concern for students. The aid package will be a welcome relief for thousands of students that WUSA represents. We do, of course, continue to monitor students' concerns, and I can share some of them with you today. We know that the Canadian Emergency Student Benefit excludes international students. We've heard stories like that of an Egyptian student who had to find a Canadian lease when his home country's borders closed to him. This leaves international students studying and residing here without support to pay the same expenses that Canadian students do, while struggling to save tuition money for tuition in the fall. We are asking our university, the provincial government, and the federal government to coordinate to ensure that these students do not fall through the cracks. We are also hoping for a quick rollout of the announced programs to assist students who are already experiencing significant financial need. We appreciate the rapid development of support programs and thank the civil service for their tireless dedication during this time. We are hoping that applications will soon be open and that students can have certainty about when to apply and when to expect payment so they can adjust their financial plans accordingly. Accurate information and a timely rollout are keys to achieving the program's policy goals of the new student benefit, the service grant, changes to loans and grants, and other programs. Once again, I thank you for your time today, and I'll now pass it to Mr. Garretts.
Thank you, Ms. Town, and through the chair, thank you to the committee. It is an honor to be here today. Apologies. WUSA is one of 9 members of the undergraduates of Canadian Research Intensive Universities, or UCRU, which represent over 250,000 students across Canada. Last month, I had the privilege to work on a report drafted by UCRU that detailed our members' concerns about financial situations and recommendations for student support in response to COVID-19. I'll detail some of my thoughts here today on the government's response where Ms. Town has not already covered them. We have heard concerns from one of our member institutions about support for Indigenous students, and we are hoping that more information will be made available to provide clarity to them about what supports might be available. Currently, it is unclear to students if support programs for Indigenous students are complementary to the CESB or whether they are exclusive. More information about this and other programs, including the Canada Student Service Grant, will be key as students plan out their summer. Students are also concerned about the rising cost of tuition, especially as post-secondary programs are administered online. Years of decreases to public funding of post-secondary education by provincial governments has led to an increased financial vulnerability of institutions to drops of enrollment, especially international enrollment, a condition that we fear this crisis may bring. The vulnerable institutions are diverse in size and in geography. Therefore, we ask the federal government to collaborate with the leadership of post-secondary institutions, as well as provincial ministers of higher education, to explore what role the federal government may play to ensure universities' finances can weather this pandemic. Students are concerned about being able to afford to continue school in September. For that reason, we'd also like to mention that we see the increases to the Canada Student Grants Program as stepping into that gap for most students in need. and we are incredibly grateful that these increases were included in the student aid package. However, student aid usually uses the previous year's tax data, which may not account for students' parents' or guardians' income, which may have been affected by COVID-19. And we asked the government to investigate how to account for this in the fall 2020 Canada Student Grant disbursements. Finally, an area of concern is with regard to eligibility requirements, which prevent students from accessing CESB if they have income even slightly in excess of $1,000 per month. In the event that CESB must be extended, which we hope will not be required, we suggest that the government investigate whether a phase out of the benefit for students earning above $1,000 in a more gradual fashion, while holding steady or increasing the $12,000 or $1,250 base amount. On behalf of UCRU, I would like to convey our thanks for the government's action, which we understand to be the largest one-time financial investment in student aid in history and proportional to the crisis that students face. We also hope that action can be taken on these outstanding priorities of international student inclusion, efficient and timely rollout, clear communication of information, and coordination to support our post-secondary institutions. We have also provided some additional detail in our joint brief, which is still under translation and will be distributed to members in the coming days. Thank you very much for your parliamentary service during this time, and thank you for listening to students' concerns. Both Ms. Town and I look forward to your questions. Thank you. Merci.
Thank you, Mr. Garretts and Ms. Town. Before we go to members of parliament for questions, Mr. Davidson and Ms. Town, I got a note from interpretation. They're having a bit of a challenge picking you up. When you are speaking, if you could just hold your mic a little closer to your mouth, that would be extremely helpful. And with that, we're going to start with the Conservatives. Mr. Melillo, I hope I didn't butcher your name. For 6 minutes, welcome to the committee. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today. I would like to thank our witnesses, of course, for joining us to speak on these important concerns, and I trust that you're all doing well and staying safe. Conservatives know that many students are going to have difficulty funding their future education or even struggling just to get by right now as they cannot find employment. And that's why we supported the government's student benefit legislation. However, I have had many conversations with business owners who have concerns about the program, and that's why we advocated to make it more flexible. As it states now, Section 5.2 of the Act identifies applicants as students who apply on the basis that they are seeking work but are unable to find it. It further states that they must attest that they are seeking work and that the minister is to make available information through the job bank if there's employment opportunities. So my question to our witnesses is, do you believe that these provisions are adequate to ensure that the benefit does not disincentivize work for students?
Oh, I believe that question was directed to Ms. Town or Mr. Garretts. Is that right, Mr. Melillo?
Yes, that's right. If they could answer that.
Hello. Thank you for the question. I think that is generally something that we would like to see. We have a hypothetical, and it's more than hypothetical, about somebody who chooses to work as a grocery clerk. If they earn $999, they can receive a benefit, but if they were to earn $1,001, depending on what levels are prescribed in regulation, they would suddenly lose a lot of money. The kind of policy that you describe is valuable to us for a different reason as well, which is the predictability of income for students. Not knowing whether you're going to be scheduled for shifts that will put you over that limit is something that might make students' financial planning difficult. So that is something that we would like to see investigated. Of course, I don't have a major in public policy, so I will leave it up to policy folks to figure out what structure works towards those ends.
Thank you. I definitely understand that, and my apologies for the confusion on who was to answer, but I'll try and keep this going directly with you. But if anyone else has a point to make, please jump in. I was concerned about that because I'm someone who was a student very recently, actually just last year, and I know that I wouldn't have wanted a long gap in my resume if there was work available. We all know that employment opportunities offer a lot more than just the income. One gets to gain experience, learn new skills, build relationships that will help in future studies or careers. So I suppose just to expand on that, do you believe that the federal government should provide alternative programs for students who would rather be working?
Thank you. And again, through you, Mr. Chair, I think that the government stepping in some form to either provide work or help connect students with work is going to be a policy that is going to be beneficial. I think you identified very correctly that that students don't want a gap in their resume, nor do they want a gap in their pocketbooks. We see experiential education as something that is going to be very key. We know that some programs have already been rolled out by the government that we saw in their background. We're interested to see where those go and how quickly they roll out and for what duration they exist. But we definitely see the opportunity to have students at work is something that is positive, and I think many students do as well.
Absolutely, and there's a lot of concerns, particularly with our agriculture and agri-food sectors right now, and that hits home in my riding as well. Places like Freshwater Cuisine, who are doing great work but facing difficult times, and without hoping not to be repetitive here, but our party proposed this specific plan to match youth to jobs in these agriculture and agri-foods industries. Do you believe that something like that might be more beneficial to some youth than the emergency payouts?
Well, I'll just start by saying that it definitely resounds in my riding as well. And my father making use of my own labor on our own farm was something that I'm sure he would be happy to have a hand to replace him. But on a more general note, I know that we have a variety of students and young people across Canada who are going to be affected by a loss of income, and matching their skills to jobs that they can fulfill is going to be something that is very important. I know we have had the opportunity to, I remember hearing from a student on the day that the program was announced who said, it's something I'd be willing to try, and I think that is something that some students may look into. I am not able to comment on the specifics of your plan. I apologize because I have not read it. However, I think it's something that probably merits further investigation, and further investigation, especially insofar as how motivated students might be to take those jobs in particular.
Thank you, Mr. Gerritz, and thank you, Mr. Melillo. Next, we're going to go to the Liberals. Mr. Turnbull, please, for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just wanted to start off by saying that I think we all know and recognize that the post-secondary institutions and sector in general, which includes, student associations and many groups that support students in that sort of ecosystem, is essential to the fight against COVID-19, and we're really happy. I'm really happy that you all made some time today to be a part of our standing committee and to provide some testimony, and I really appreciate your role. I'll probably start with a few opening remarks, and then my first question will be for you, Mr. Davidson. Our government recently announced a $9 billion package of support for students and recent graduates. We know that students are under considerable pressure right now and vulnerable and needing financial support to continue their studies in the fall. And this is an important step in terms of them starting their careers eventually. I think I read a report recently by an organization called Undergraduates of Canadian Research Intensive Universities. It was a petition about post-secondary student supports, and it was before the federal government launched the CESB, the Canadian Emergency Student Benefit. And they were identified 2 pressing gaps, which were students that got financial aid in the last year who were having trouble meeting their financial obligations, i.e. their living expenses over the summer, and the students that did not get financial aid during that last academic year, but who also were having trouble meeting their financial obligations over the summer. Many times, in many cases, I think their parents might also not be working at this time. As we know, some students do rely on their parents for some financial support. So these 2 groups of individuals, which I understand are a considerable number of students out there, I think were the target specifically for the Canadian Emergency Student Benefit, which offers $1,250 per month from May through August, and $500 extra for students with dependents or permanent disabilities. So my question is, I think with more than 1 million students expected to receive this benefit, do you think we got it right, Mr. Davidson? Like, is this really covering off the immediate needs of most students?
Thank you very much for the question. And let me just say that I think there's been some tremendous work done over the last several weeks to rebuild Canada's social safety net. In rebuilding it, you do find people that have been missed or vulnerabilities. I mean, that is the really exciting public policy work to be done for years to come about how we build back better. But the scale and scope of the CESB is unprecedented. The speed with which it's been developed has been lightning speed, and it's making a difference in the lives of students. One of the reasons we're so pleased about that is it gives hope and it gives confidence to students that their economic needs will be met as they move through the summer and into the fall. We want to make sure that students remain attached to their post-secondary enterprise, whether it's through the college system or through the university system. This is a generation that Canada is going to need, and so these investments are really important. And I would just say that it's not just about the student financial aid components of it, but the work integrated learning aspects of it. Those programs are oversubscribed already. Helping businesses take on students to provide a work integrated learning experience is critically important. And then seeing the policy iterate out to include an alternative for volunteer service is also really important. And I would just say that, knowing a number of young people, having been at home for 4, 6, 7, 8 weeks, they are eager to take on work that they can find, and they are resilient, and they're going to do great for their country. And this kind of support is the sort of thing that puts us all in a good space for a strong fall in September.
Thanks, Mr. Davidson. And, to echo my colleague, Mr. Malilo's comments about students really wanting to work, I think this is another key aspect of that $9 billion package was, really looking at re-enrollment in the fall. Certainly all students and all post-secondary institutions out there want to see students continue their success and continue their advancing in their learning. And I think what we've done is created measures that basically create more targeted job opportunities for students and then greater access to financial assistance. And there's been quite a bit in both of those areas. The Canada Summer Jobs is already something that was creating about 70,000 jobs per year, but we've expanded that and made it much more flexible. We've added agriculture jobs and targeted platform or a portal for finding those jobs, Canada Service Corps, Canada Student Service Grants, etc. So there's a numerous activities and measures that have been targeted towards job creation for students. So, and then the financial assistance piece, we've doubled and enhanced this Canada Student Grants program. We've offered broadened and created more eligibility for student financial assistance, and we've increased the amount for Indigenous post-secondary education and those distinction-based supports, which I'm really happy to see is increased by about $75.2 million. Ms. Oliver, maybe you could start by commenting on whether you think these measures are going to really help students and the re-enrollment that I'm sure we're all concerned about in the fall.
Ms. Oliver, that was a long question, but it requires a short answer.
Sorry.
Okay. I think we're actually seeing the impact of it already. We're starting to see shifts in enrollment and our students talking more positively about returning in the fall. biggest barrier for our students right now is the anticipation of whether or not we are going to have to deliver programs online, which will, of course, be completely dependent on where we are in the pandemic and what the limitations may or may not be. But in terms of bridging gaps for our students, absolutely, we are hearing, I meet with the student leaders about 3 times a week. We are hearing it's made a big difference in terms of the level of anxiety and the ability to consider continuing their education in the fall.
Thank you, Ms. Oliver. Suite, nous avons Madame Chabot.
We now move to Ms. Chabot for 6 minutes. Ms. Chabot, you have the floor. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a few questions, and then I'll give the floor to my colleague, Christina Michaud, from a beautiful area of Canada, as beautiful as yours, Mr. Chairman. First of all, thank you very much to all of you who have accepted to appear before the committee. I believe that your testimony, and I'm speaking of the student organizations as well as Universities Canada, well, we're here at the very heart of an important issue. COVID-19, unfortunately, has had a strong impact on you. My question is for Mr. Davidson. You said at the outset that universities are engines for the economy, for talent, but I would add that they're an engine for knowledge as well. We know to what extent, not too long ago, in our CEGEPs in Quebec and in universities, well, we saw that they were playing an important role for future generations and for our economic recovery. We're going to have to be relying on these young people. So 2 things. First of all, research. You explained that there was some support for research on COVID-19 in universities. We can bear witness to this as well. In Quebec, this was saluted. Fundamental research is important, and we all stated that we hope that it's not just because of COVID-19 that we'll be doing fundamental research. My question pertains to foreign students in Quebec. There are 30,000 of them, fewer than in Ontario, but it is a concern of ours. A lot of universities are trying to get organized CEGEPs in the regions as well. In the Matane area, 40% of students are foreign students. So what solutions would you have for us in this regard? Thank you. Thank you for the question. If I may, I will call upon my colleague, Wendy Thérien, who will be able to answer more readily, more easily than me in French. Good afternoon, and thank you very much. And thank you for inviting us here today. With regard to investments in research, indeed, we were very pleased to see the investments that were made. And as well, I wanted to underscore the important role that universities will be playing and are playing daily to find solutions, short-term and long-term solutions with regard to the major issues facing our society. And just like you, we're hoping that the government will do more, invest more in research. With regard to students, foreign students, we share the concerns expressed by our student colleagues here today. It is important to ensure that the students who remain in this country will have the opportunity to return to their studies in September. We're also concerned, we are concerned that there will be students. Ms. Thérien, forgive me, but you have to change the channel that you're speaking on. It is better for translation if you switch to French. Yes, forgive me. So we share the concerns expressed by our colleagues, the students here participating in this meeting. We want to ensure that foreign students do have the means to go back to school in the fall. We're also worried, just as Mr. Davidson was saying, there are several institutions throughout Canada and Quebec who largely depend on international students. And there are several factors at play to determine if they will be able to go back to their studies in Canada, come back to Canada. And it's because of these concerns that we're asking the federal government to work in cooperation with provinces in order to find solutions, in order to compensate for the lost income brought about by the closure of the borders and the departure of foreign students. This will have an impact throughout the system for universities as well as colleges. Thank you. I now call upon my colleague, Ms. Michaud. Yes, thank you. I would like to come back to the PCU. Mr. Melillo talked about some concerns in the industry. Throughout Canada, people are fearful. They don't want this benefit, the CESB, to be a disincentive to work. Even if there will be fewer jobs available this summer, we'll need help working the fields on farms. We need students, and our fear is that they won't make an effort to find a job. I was a student not too long ago myself, so I'm convinced that most of them are ready and willing, and they want to leave their confinement to find a job. They have bills to pay, etc. But I'm already receiving messages from students in my riding. They're looking for the CESB forms online. They're ready to apply, and we're not yet in the growing season, at least not in my area, and most of the positions haven't been posted online yet, the positions to be filled. Do you think it could be a disincentive to work, the famous CESB, even if it's being favorably welcomed? Short response, if possible, please.
Oui, vous pouvez y aller.
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Garretts.
I cannot speak for every individual student's circumstance. I am, as I answered to Member Melillo, I know that there are many students who may be interested in taking these roles, but we are speaking about hundreds of thousands of students who are out of work. Obviously, there are going to be some who are going to be able to not find work, including even taking into account the agricultural sector. So we do know that there will be some students who are looking for the CESB application link. I have friends who ask me already as well. But I do also know students who are looking for work or are already employed. I don't think we are. I don't think we are setting students up to cheat the system, and I think that there is now a declaration as part of that a part of the application that says ask students to be honest in whether they are able to do this. And part of this crisis is recognizing that you are looking out for your neighbor, and part of that is taking these programs on good faith. And we hope that students will be able to do that. It's part of our civic value. It's part of what we expect of students as citizens, and I hope that they will do that. I apologize if my answer isn't as comprehensive as you may have expected or wanted, but that is what I have.
Thank you, Mr. Garretts. Merci, Madame Michaud.
Thank you, Ms. Michaud. Madame Kwan, pour 6 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
To all the witnesses. My first question is to Mr. Davidson. The governments have come through with the wage subsidy program, but they do not apply to government agencies, municipalities, universities, and so on. And I'm wondering whether or not that is how that is impacting you. Is that a concern for you?
Thank you very much for the question. Yes, it is a concern for our members right across the country. I mean, every sector is facing challenges as a result of the pandemic, and universities have done their level best to keep people whole through to the end of April, through the beginning of May. But as the campuses have been closed over a number of weeks, there are labor issues to be addressed, and the wage subsidy would be a very effective tool for our members. And I know that the intent was to make sure that publicly funded agencies didn't participate in the wage subsidy. But it's important for members of this committee to know that more than half the revenues of universities are from non-public sources. I mean, universities are now publicly supported, not publicly funded. And in some cases, for some institutions, more than 63% of their revenues come from non-government sources. And so the wage subsidy could be a very valuable tool to help mitigate job loss as we navigate the pandemic.
Thank you. And so what I'm hearing then is for you to advocate for the government to lift that restriction for universities. The other question I have related to this as well is in the research sector. What has the implications been in the research sector with universities and colleges and so on not being eligible for the wage subsidy?
You know, I think you'll see in the way the government responded to in the first weeks of the pandemic, they're taking real care to make sure the people that are most affected as individuals were addressed first. And so the investments that have been made to support research really do support the early career researchers, the graduate students, and the postdoctoral fellows to try to keep their salaries whole during the disruption that's happening on campuses. Because two things are happening at once. The government, the universities are ramping up their COVID research, but they're also having to stand down their non-essential or their non-urgent research. And that carries costs. And so we've worked with the federal government over the last several weeks to make sure that the individuals are to the best as possible kept whole, but also that those surrounding costs, those institutional costs of research, also get met to be able to keep as much of the workforce whole and to be able to keep the research enterprise ready to go as the economy reopens.
Are you telling me that the matter is now resolved then?
We're grateful for the initial investments that have been made to support research. There was a rapid response mechanism to advance COVID research. There was a second round of that. There's been a third set of investments in research. But it's important that the research enterprise remain able to move quickly in these challenging times. And so we continue to work with federal officials on a range of elements to support the research enterprise.
If there was an ask that you can provide to the government at this point in time, what would that be?
Specifically on the research environment, it's to fund those costs that will help keep the research enterprise as ready to go as the economy reopens. There have been terrific investments to advance COVID research. There's been terrific investments to support individual researchers whose work may be disrupted through the pandemic. But we need to keep paying attention to the full costs of research as we move forward.
I'm going to turn to the student side of the issue. The student support subsidy, if you will, came in at less than the 2,000 counterpart in CERB. I wonder if our student representatives could comment on that.
Thank you. And to the member through the chair, I would say, if you ask somebody if they would like more money, I think their job is to say yes. But ultimately, this program has been announced, and it's been announced at that level. When we looked at the expenses that the average student has, at least between rent, expected tuition contribution, and food, the amount will be satisfactory to get students through those particular living expenses. We do have concerns over regional living costs, which I'm sure you can appreciate. But we're at this point, our main concern is not necessarily the ability of students to meet expenses, and we know that is a very big concern. But there is a concern around equity, which is saying that a student who is out of work, the same as any other Canadian, they get $1,250 versus the other Canadians getting $2,000. That's definitely something we would like to see rectified if there was another iteration of this program.
Thank you. That's interesting because the
Thank
students
you,
that
Ms.
I'm hearing
Corn.
from my riding are saying that they need the 2,000. But interesting that not all students require that.
Thank you, Ms.
From
Kwan, and thank you, Mr. Garrett. Next, we'll go to Ms. Falk for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I'd like to thank all our witnesses for your comments. And like all Canadians, we know students and young Canadians are also facing uncertainties and disruptions to COVID-19. So as the committee evaluates the government's response to this health crisis and looks forward, our students are a very important consideration in this. The Canada Emergency Student Benefit is providing immediate and necessary financial assistance to students, but we know that the impact of this health crisis will go well beyond an immediate financial need. So ensuring the success of students has to have a long-term approach. And the long-term success of students will in turn have a positive impact on our economic success. So in the previous parliament, this committee did a study on experiential learning. In fact, it included contributions from Universities Canada, Durham College, and University of Waterloo. So during that study, we had heard over and over again that experiential learning was invaluable to ensuring the long-term integration into the workforce. So whether it's apprenticeships, co-op programs, work-integrated learning, volunteerism, or internships, these are all opportunities that go beyond a short-term financial opportunity by connecting young Canadians to the workforce. One government program that has long helped local economies and students find job opportunities is the Canada Summer Jobs Program. So during this health crisis, the minister extended the deadline for the program and increased the funding eligibility of private and public sector employers. The downside of these announcements is that they came with no additional funds. So in effect, by increasing the funds available to these employers so that they can receive up to 100% of the minimum hourly wage for each employer, the amount of jobs available could result into half as many jobs. So Conservatives, as we've heard today, have also proposed a new program to specifically match students with summer jobs in the agriculture sector. And a program of this nature would have an immense impact on my local economy here in Battleford, Lloydminster, but obviously others around Canada as well, other ridings. So I guess my question, and this would be for anybody, is as we navigate this health crisis and eventually come out on the other side, what role do you see experiential learning playing in ensuring student success?
Okay, who would like to take a try at that one?
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Please, Ms. Town, go ahead.
I think you hit the nail on the head, so to speak, that experiential learning is very important. As a student enrolled in a co-op program myself, I can say that one day in the workplace is certainly worth many hours in the classroom. And I think that as we are considering the gradual reopening of the country, it's important to consider how students' experiential learning opportunities can or cannot be translated online. Certainly students don't just work in the summer, they also work in the fall and throughout the school year to continue to gain that experience through year-long internships or shorter work placements. And not all student jobs can be conducted in a work from home method, and student jobs might be the first to be cut from organizations that usually hire student interns. So I think it's important to consider how students can be supported as we work to reopen the country and not just for the immediate term. Is there anybody else?
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Mr. Davidson and then Ms. Oliver, please.
I'll yield to Ms. Oliver as well.
Okay, Ms. Oliver, the floor is yours.
Thank you. As I mentioned in my opening, experiential learning is critical for the students in the college environment. But I think too often we consider it as a one-way street, that the students are learning from the employer. In our current environment, the one thing we absolutely have to do is focus on the future and the skills that our students are learning by having gone to online platforms and the ideas and creativity that we are going to depend on from them going into that workforce. Our difficulty right now is finding those matches and the opportunities for the students to still engage. Not every experiential learning opportunity can be online. And so we have to find new and safe ways for our students to still have that experience and for that opportunity to share knowledge and ideas with future employers.
Thank you, Ms. Oliver. I'm sorry, Mr. Davidson, we're out of time for that question. And thank you, Ms. Falk. And for the final questioner for this panel, Ms. Young, please, for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all of our witnesses. Very interesting discussion on students and how they're impacted by COVID-19. I wanted to start by talking to Mr. Garretts and Ms. Towns and thank them for appearing. I did read the UCRU's statement, and I just wanted to quote. It said that the government's response was a win for current students, incoming students, and new graduates, and I think we can all agree with that. Now, some of my opposition colleagues, and we've heard that over the last hour, seem to think that young Canadians who may apply for these benefits may see this as a disincentive to work. I wondered if maybe starting with Ms. Town, if you could comment on this specific seemingly thinking on the part of some members.
Sure. Thank you very much for the question. I do not think, and from my colleagues and peers, I haven't heard the CESB to be a disincentive to work. Many of my peers were disappointed when their job prospects for the summer kind of evaporated in light of the pandemic. And as I would also add, Mr. Garrett's highlighted that the amount provided by CESB is enough to cover students' living expenses, but it is not enough to ensure that students are able to support themselves throughout the school terms, paying tuition and their living expenses in the subsequent 8 to 12 months. And for that reason, I think that students would very much appreciate the opportunity to be gainfully employed in a full-time position where they would be making closer to their typical income for the summer months and be more financially secure in their attempts to return to school in the fall.
Would you agree, though, that gainfully employed you'd want to match skills to jobs? I think there's a feeling that a lot of these jobs in the agriculture sector would be a match, but these are very highly skilled jobs in the agriculture sector, and I'm just wondering if Ms. Town, Mr. Garretts could comment on whether that would be a really an appropriate match.
I have to apologize. I'm not familiar with the type of jobs that are being proposed in the agriculture sector. I think that students would relish the opportunity to learn new skills, and those can be applied to their field of study. It would be my hope.
Thank you very much. Ms. Oliver, if I could, through the chair, ask you a question. You mentioned about the costs of just digital transformation, and Paul Davidson, you did as well. I'm hoping that part of the announced funding, the $9 billion, would go to that. Do you not see, Ms. Oliver, if you could comment on that some of what you will be receiving could be used to help with this technical transformation?
Yes, absolutely, it can be. It's a mammoth task, though. I think people misinterpret that if you can teach a class, you can teach it online. It takes significant work and time from faculty to develop a truly online delivery. It's not as simple as standing in front of a camera and just lecturing or putting up your PowerPoints. And so there's a huge piece that is also about education of faculty and how to deliver an effective program. So yes, absolutely grateful for that investment, and we see that as being helpful. It is, but universal design and education of people for that is a mammoth project.
Mr. Davidson?
Thank you for the question. And this is a really important piece of work that needs to be tackled. And I think increased investment would be really important now. In the $9 billion, it's mostly the CESB. Then there's really welcome investment in work integrated learning and also volunteer service. But the cost of digital transformation for moving courses fully online is real. The cost of being able to provide academic supports, job counseling supports, and mental health supports is significant. And the benefits are not only to existing students who are in the sort of 18 to 24 demographic, it's also part of the welcome mat to international students, to attract and retain international students that are so important, particularly if the borders are closed. And I know that many of you have got constituents that have been displaced by this current pandemic. If we have fully integrated online higher education, those folks can sharpen their skills while they're at home. There's a chance for upskilling and reskilling that was part of the 2019 agenda already. We're ready to advance that, but we need government partners to make that happen faster.
Thank you, Mr. Davidson, and thank you, Ms. Young. I'd like to thank all of the witnesses for being with us, for their presentations here today. We have another panel ready to come in, so we're going to suspend for 3 minutes for the switchover. Your answers and your presentations will be extremely helpful to our work, and we are grateful to you for that. Thank you. We are suspended.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you, committee members.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, so good afternoon to the new witnesses. We have Miss Lennox. Can you just say a few words, please, just for the sound check? And you just have to unmute yourself first.
Can you hear me now?
There we are, yes.
So my name's Marissa Lennox, and I'm with the Canadian Association of Retired Persons, otherwise known as CARP.
Thank you. The sound was very good for me. Can I get confirmation from the interpretation as well?
Good evening, Miss Lennox. This is Interpretation Services. I wonder if you don't have another microphone that you could use?
I could find a headset, maybe.
That would be amazing if you could find that. Thank you.
Okay, I just have to step out of the screen for a moment. Is that all right?
That's perfectly fine by us. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have Miss Hall. Welcome. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you very much.
Good, good. And do you also have a microphone on your, sorry, the screen is moving now, on your headset here?
There is a microphone on it. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, that's much better. If you can hold it while you're speaking.
Okay.
Just to make sure that we have the best sound quality possible.
Okay.
And can you try a few words for now?
Well, my name is Jody Hall. I am the chair of the Canadian Association for Long-Term Care.
Good. But just remember to hold the microphone, please.
Okay.
I'm so sorry. We need the most beautiful sound possible.
So is this helpful if I hold it closer?
It does make a big difference, yes.
Okay. I will certainly endeavor to do that.
Thank
Sorry
you.
about that.
No worries. Can I just get confirmation from the interpretation as well?
Yes, this is Interpretation Services. Thank you for holding it close to your mouth. The sound is significantly better. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we're just waiting for Miss Lennox. Oh, and she's coming back. Oh, you're muted again.
There we go. Can you hear me now?
We can. Do you have a microphone on your headset?
Yes, I do.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, so same for you. If you can hold it while you're speaking, maybe closer to your...
Like this? Would you like me to speak
Oh,
like this?
yes, that's much better.
Okay.
Is it good for the interpretation as well?
That is much better for interpretation. Thank you so much, Ms. Lennox.
My pleasure.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's all yours.
We are now back in session and ready to resume our meeting. Thank you to our second panel of witnesses for joining us today. From the Canadian Association for Long-Term Care, we have Jody Hall, Chair. And from the Canadian Association of Retired Persons, we have Marissa Lennox, Chief Policy Officer. Ms. Hall, we're going to call on you first for your opening statement. You have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. I certainly appreciate the opportunity to present this evening. First, I'd like to say about who Caltech is. Again, I sincerely thank you for the opportunity to present here this evening about the work that the long-term care sector is doing, and also how we're responding to the COVID-19 situation in Canada. My name is Jody Hall, and I'm here today as the chair of the Canadian Association for Long-Term Care. Caltech is committed to ensuring that long-term care for all, and we advocate on behalf of seniors to share knowledge, insights, and best practices to ensure that seniors can live and age with dignity. As the leading voice for quality long-term care in Canada, our members deliver publicly funded healthcare services for seniors across Canada. To begin, I'll provide an overview of long-term care sector and the changing demographics in Canada. So current trends and a sector overview, the most current data indicates that there are over 150,000 long-term care beds across the country and over 1,300 long-term care homes in the country. The 2016 census data indicated that for the first time in Canadian history, the number of persons over the age of 65 outnumbered those under the age of 14. Population projections show that the gap between the two age groups will continue to widen, with data suggesting that the portion of the Canadian population over the age of 65 and older will rise by approximately 25% by 2036. The number of seniors 80 years of older is predicted to double between 2011 and 2036. Our seniors are living longer and are entering long-term care more fragile than ever before. And residents who move into long-term care do so with complex health issues. For example, over 60% of people in long-term care experience advanced forms of dementia, including Alzheimer's. 70% have advanced heart and circulatory diseases, and 58% have advanced hypertension-related conditions. So first, I want to acknowledge, as I address the issue of COVID, the seniors and our residents who have passed away as a result of the COVID-19. Our hearts are absolutely with the families, and I'm sure that you can join me in extending our deepest condolences to all of them. I also want to thank all of the frontline workers who continue to provide compassionate care to Canada's seniors. We will have lots of time to review what has been done differently, but I think we will find that the impact of the COVID-19 in long-term care homes could have been mitigated if governments had been more proactive in supporting the care sector prior to these outbreaks. Some of the challenges that I will be discussing today have been exacerbated by COVID-19, but really they represent systemic issues. In many respects, these systemic issues require support from the federal government, and our members have been raising these issues for many years. So in regards to health human resourcing, we are at a crisis point in Canada with respect to our supply of health workers in the senior care sector. Attracting and retaining individuals in careers that care for Canada's seniors has become increasingly challenging, especially when preparing for a further influx of seniors. that will require care for multiple and complex conditions. In my own home province of New Brunswick, where because of the age of our own workforce and the anticipated number of retirements, we're expecting to have a need of over 3,000 care employees that will need to be hired over the next 8 years. For a small province like New Brunswick, that's a very significant number. So supporting healthcare aides, continuing care assistants, and personal support workers involves structured education and continued training to support these individuals in providing the highest quality of care. It also requires structured governance models to affirm the healthcare aide credentials, conduct, and competency. We understand that the current healthcare assistant labor force cannot be solved through the recruitment of international students and nurses alone. However, Caltech believes that internationally recruited students and nurses does offer an opportunity in part to address the current supply crisis for trained staff in Canada. To harness this opportunity, the long-term care sector requires the federal government to support policy changes that are aimed at solving the chronic labor shortage. A health human resource strategy for the long-term care sector must focus on the right number, mix, and geographic distribution of providers, as well as the appropriate setting for providers to deliver the services. Caltech is calling on health ministers across the country to pick up where they left off over 20 years ago when the original health accord was negotiated, and there was work done at that time on a health human resource strategy. And through the leadership of the federal Minister of Health, recognize that the significant challenges that long-term care sector faces in supporting our aging population is still present 20 years later. Through the leadership of the federal government, there must be collaboration between the provinces, the territories, and the long-term care sector to develop and implement a pan-Canadian health and human resources strategy. So to address the issue of infrastructure, the severity of the COVID-19 outbreak has presented unique challenges for staff in the homes. Containing the spread of infection appears to have been more challenging in older homes. Many older homes still have 3 and 4 bed wards. They do not have private rooms, which makes it very challenging to implement cohorting plans and isolation measures. Older homes generally have narrow hallways, and often there is only one dining room on a main floor, both of which make it very hard to keep residents apart. On April 11th, the Public Health Agency of Canada released an interim guidance document on infection prevention and control in long-term care homes. Some of the guidelines, such as restrictions to certain work zones and the use of single rooms for certain types of care, are almost impossible for the majority of homes to follow, given that they were not always built to accommodate single rooms for each resident. Older long-term care homes.
If you could start to wrap it up there, Ms. Hall, you're well over time.
Oh, pardon me. So I know that Minister McKenna has noted that there are shovel-ready projects, and we're certainly hoping that in a post-pandemic period, that the country will be ready to work with the long-term care sector and allow us to access the infrastructure funding to make that happen. So we know there are systemic challenges that the sector has been grappling with for years, and the lack of support has led to increased challenges during this time. We strongly urge the federal government to provide assistance in these two critical areas for housing and care, and not just in the time of crisis, but for every day. So thank you, and I'm very happy to take any questions.
You may well get a chance to address some of the things that were in the rest of your statement through the course of questions.
Sure.
Ms. Lennox, please, for 5 minutes.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to present in front of you today. CARP, as many of you may know, is a national not-for-profit, nonpartisan organization with 320,000 members in every province and territory across Canada. I think it's also important to distinguish that while most of our members are retired and enjoy above average education and income, an overwhelming majority consistently report that CARP represents the interests of all older Canadians across Canada. We believe that all older adults deserve to live in dignity and with respect, regardless of income level, family support, and health challenges. COVID-19 has undermined these fundamental principles of aging well and revealed a lack of planning and preparation that would secure the health and well-being of seniors during a pandemic. CARP has been actively engaged with our membership since the onset of COVID-19 in providing credible and reliable information to older adult populations on our website through programming and via surveys that we conduct to better understand our members' needs and concerns. We hosted 3 virtual town hall events, each with a reach of up to 12,500 members, to provide them with a forum to ask their specific questions from trusted experts on matters related to health and finance. These sessions were recorded for television and aired on our media networks across Canada. What we've heard largely from our members, apart from the obvious human consequence, is that seniors have been negatively impacted by an increase in the cost of living from grocery premiums and delivery fees, an increase in prescription medication fees, a lack of free or discounted community services, whether that's laundry services, meals at community centers, volunteer tax preparation, all which closed down due to physical distancing restrictions. In addition, as you know, stock markets have taken a plunge and many seniors have seen significant declines in their retirement savings. In a survey pre-COVID, the majority of our members had already expressed that they were concerned about outliving their savings in retirement. With the recent economic impacts of COVID-19, these fears have really never been more real. While we understand that the government's initial economic response was to quickly address income replacement, several weeks have passed and there have been no meaningful announcements around addressing the financial concerns of seniors. Retirees, as you know, are ineligible for CERB. While the 25% reduction in the minimum RIF withdrawal was welcome, it was not retroactive, and many would rather leave their savings untouched given current market volatility. Additionally, the $9 million that was earmarked for seniors and provided to United Way was met with confusion on how to access it. Our own call centers and those of United Way's 211 service have been flooded with calls to better understand how that $9 million was to be distributed and accessed. I'd also like to speak to what my colleague was speaking about earlier from Caltech, and that's to a more urgent piece around how we care for older adults, particularly in congregate settings and long-term care. If COVID-19 has revealed anything, it's revealed the following: that we warehouse frail and very ill seniors in unsafe situations which are underfunded, understaffed, and often with little or no certified training. And we expect individuals and their families to pay a significant part of the privilege to be in those facilities. It is unconscionable that of 4,900 deaths in Canada so far from COVID-19, 82% were from a population whom we are duty-bound to protect, and we failed them. And this is not the responsibility of the federal government alone, but it is the duty of the federal government to make sure it doesn't happen again. If we've learned anything, it's that we didn't have a real plan in place for seniors in long-term care in this kind of pandemic, in spite of having advanced warning from other countries, seeing previous crises of similar scale like SARS and MERS, and the experience with seasonal flu that spreads in these settings and claims seniors' lives annually. These are our most vulnerable residents. We can and we must do better. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lennox. Now we will proceed with questions, beginning with Ms. Cusey, please, for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Ms. Hall and Ms. Lennox, both very passionate testimonies. Ms. Hall, I'll start with you. Provincial governments have increased protections for seniors in long-term care homes throughout the pandemic by limiting visitors, providing staff with personal protective equipment, and preventing employees from working at multiple homes. Ms. Lennox, I believe, just alluded to this, but in your opinion, should the federal government have intervened earlier so that these steps were taken earlier?
Thank you for the question. I do think that there was an opportunity for greater collaboration between the levels of government. And some of the challenges that we have noted were exacerbated through the COVID-19 situation, but they are long-term systemic challenges. And so some of the things that were, for example, put forward by the Public Health Agency of Canada simply couldn't be done in many examples because of the shared living space that we have. So when you have 4-bed wards, you have very narrow hallways, in some of the older buildings. It makes some of the infection control practices incredibly difficult. And even with the implementation of one employee to one employer and asking everyone to wear the mask as they provide care to residents when social distancing couldn't be maintained, even things like access to PPE was a significant challenge for many homes across the country. And so federal government assistance could have gone a long ways to support that.
So building on that, Ms. Hall, should the federal government have provided greater assistance to ensure all long-term care facilities had enough personal protective equipment at the start of the pandemic?
Yes, I do think that there was steps that could have been taken that would have absolutely helped, especially at the beginning of the pandemic. Things have come a long ways since the start of this, but at the beginning there was chronic shortages. There was a lot of unanswered questions. There was many questions around access. Where do we get it? Even how do we purchase it? How do we know about the correct quality of the product that we need? The training that's associated with that. The list goes on in regards to that. And so support from the federal government could have been extremely helpful in providing a much higher level of support to the homes, especially at the beginning of this outbreak.
Thank you, Ms. Hall. Ms. Lennox, you touched upon this. Seniors with low incomes and mental health conditions are significantly less likely to have access to critical supports, especially social supports, and you mentioned some of them which have not been able to be delivered in this time of pandemic, which they rely upon to get groceries, medications, and other essential items. What can the government be doing to ensure that these seniors are getting the supports that they need?
Canada has been providing. It has a range of services that could be adapted for low-income seniors. There are specifically two programs that I think could be provided, would support seniors, low-income seniors remain independent in their home and in their community. This includes the caregiver recognition benefit. This is a benefit that provides, basically it's a monthly payment to an informal caregiver, whether that's a family member or a friend who supports that individual with daily personal care support. I know many people that have had to give up full-time employment in order to care for a family member. The other one is, of course, the Veterans Independence Program, which is essentially payments for home and healthcare services, as you know, to help. So I think those are important programs. The other thing CARP has advocated for is, when we look at the financial security of seniors, it's really been impacted by COVID-19. And we would encourage the federal government to accelerate its commitment to increase OAS and CPP, the CPP survivor benefit for those that are most vulnerable.
Thank you. I know, as you've mentioned, for many seniors, the cost of living has increased recently due to COVID-19, and the majority of seniors are especially vulnerable to these changes due to their fixed income. You did touch upon this, saying that it's not preferable, but we have put forward the policy suggestions, and many seniors are asking the government to allow for a one-time tax exemption of up to a certain amount of for seniors who need to withdraw certain amounts from their RRSPs and RRIS. Would you suggest that the government do this so seniors can adapt in some regard to the recent increases to their cost of living?
So I completely agree with this, and this would impact people under the age of 71 whose RSPs haven't converted to a RIF, but eliminating the withholding tax on RSP withdrawals, what we've said is up to a period of 2 years, allow 2 years to repay that tax liability. I think that would go a long way to support seniors who are struggling with liquidity at this time. I think it's an important measure for sure, yes.
Excellent. And I'll finish by asking the same question that I asked Ms. Hall. In your opinion, should the federal government have intervened earlier in long-term care facilities so that steps that were taken later in the pandemic were taken earlier?
Short answer, please.
I do. So I acknowledge and I appreciate, obviously, the balancing act that the federal government has to respect regarding its role in Canada's health system. However, I think in the context of a pandemic like COVID, where the Public Health Agency of Canada has such an important role to play in the coordination of a pan-Canadian response, I think it's reasonable that FAC would work with respective provincial and territorial provinces to ensure things like an adequate supply of essential products. So I think that that's one way that the federal government could have intervened. I think it's, I think another thing that we've learned is that most of the key products needed for this response are not manufactured in Canada, and there was really no stockpiling of critical supplies to respond to any surge. And so if anything, I think going forward, there's a role for the federal government and provincial governments together to work on really, a list of essential products and recommended volumes of supplies needed in the event of a surge caused by something like COVID. And I think that had that been in place in advance, that would have allowed for sort of a more agile response on the part of the provinces and might have actually minimized the need for the federal government to have to seek supplies internationally.
Thank you.
We could talk more
Ms.
about
Lennox.
the failure of the nest, but that's another committee. Thank you both.
Thank you, Ms. Cusey. Next, we have Mr. Housefather for 6 minutes, please. Mr. Housefather, I think you're still on mute.
You are correct, Mr. Chair. Sorry about that. I was starting to thank both of the witnesses and their organizations for the incredible work that you do. And on the Liberal side, I want to say to all of the victims of COVID-19 in the long-term care facilities and their families that we feel their pain. My dad is turning 88 on Wednesday. He is in a long-term care facility here in Montreal because 2 years ago, he had a series of falls and my mom can no longer care for him at home. Over the last 9 weeks, he has not seen his wife, his children, or his grandchildren. And he is just one person out of many that is suffering in these facilities in a way that we cannot even fathom. And the families around them are suffering. And the home that he's in has COVID-19, and on his floor, there are a dozen people affected. And it's scary. It's scary for all of us. So I want to thank also the long-term care workers who have been doing an awesome job despite being underpaid and overtaxed in this equation. But I do want to mention as well that I do come from the province of Quebec, and this is an area of provincial jurisdiction. While the federal government and all governments have a role to play in working with one another, it is clear we have to remember that this is an area of primary provincial jurisdiction, and that has to be recognized. And the federal government then needs to step up when the provinces ask for help, and we've got to help. Because going forward, especially in a pandemic, Canadians don't care what level of government is constitutionally responsible. They just care that the work gets done. So can I ask first, Ms. Hall, would you tell us, just in brief, going forward, do you believe there should be a committee study provincially and federally working together on how to improve matters in long-term care facilities across Canada, and then have an accord between the federal governments and the provincial and territorial governments where we provide money, and the territorial and provincial governments then affect standards that we require in return for that money?
Mm-hmm. So for certainly from on behalf of Caltech, we have long stated that there needs to be engagement with the federal government, and work between the provinces and the federal government needs to greatly expand. This, as we've seen, as our, some of the data that I shared earlier, we're in the midst of a tremendous transition in the Canadian population, where we're becoming a much older demographic. And, when we look to the circumstances of the individual provinces, I think it's quite fair to say that, they have significant challenges as it relates to funding appropriately for their healthcare budgets. It's often taking up much of their provincial revenues that are available to them. And so we see this as a shared responsibility between the federal government, between the provincial government, but also amongst the sector and long-term care representatives. I think it's a topic that all Canadians care about. I think we're seeing, certainly, I think it was always there, but as this pandemic has advanced, it has become a very central issue. How that can play out, we're absolutely supportive of having a greater understanding and working together. One of the challenges that we have, because in each province there is a unique approach to long-term care, is to have much better access to shared data. Right now, there is not a centralized data approach, but there is opportunities to introduce that. Things like the management information system or universal usage of an inter-RI long-term care system that allows for assessment data to be comparable right across the board, which would help to inform investments and other types of initiatives to better understand the standard of care that's being delivered. So I think that could be established or could be accomplished through a shared strategy between federal and provincial government, and as well as looking at things like a pan-Canadian strategy for health human resources could be critically important. And I think it's the federal government who could lead us through that.
Thank you. And again, respecting that this falls in provincial jurisdiction and the provinces have to work with us and agree. We cannot impose on provinces. And I think this just needs to be understood constitutionally. Mr. Chair, do I have more than 2 minutes left or do I only have 2 minutes?
You have a little over 1 minute.
Then I have to pass to Monsieur Lauzon. Monsieur Lauzon, c'est à toi.
Bonjour à tous.
Mr. Lauzon, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much. I will complete what Mr. Housefather was saying. I'm a seniors representative as parliamentary secretary, and I wish to thank you very sincerely for all of your questioning here today. In many communities, seniors are clearly facing isolation problems, access to caregivers. They are suffering from financial insecurity because of COVID-19. Together here today, we're all discussing the solutions. Two things are of concern to me: mental health and the impact on women in particular. There are measures, possible measures that we could take, but this is a vast challenge that is added to the problems we are familiar with. Are there any suggestions you might make in order for us to help improve seniors' mental health and to help women in the challenges that they face? The question is for either Ms. Hall or Ms. Lennox.
I don't speak French fluently, and so I didn't understand the question. Is there a translator that can support me with the specific question? I'm sorry about this.
You should
I think you should have the translation already.
Ms. Hall, are you able to answer the question?
Yeah.
We're actually out of time, so I need a short answer anyway.
Okay, the short answer is that, yes, I think there are strategies that we could work on together. Mental health is a critical issue, not only for the residents in our homes, but also for our workforce. And it's something we would very much like to champion developments in that regard. Many of our residents are predominantly, we have a higher percentage of female residents. So certainly there are a host of other issues that can stem from that, and we'd be very open to further conversation.
Thank you, Ms. Hall. Merci, Monsieur Lauzon.
Thank you, Mr. Lauzon. I'm very sorry. I apologize for having shut you down, but you went over the 6 minutes. Ms. Chabot for 6 minutes, please. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome, ladies. Thank you for your testimony. And I would say to both of you at the outset that the situation of our seniors in this crisis, well, we can all agree that they were very seriously affected, and it's mostly women indeed who have been struck down, women who are suffering, who live alone, and the impacts are in all areas: financial, social, there's isolation, health issues, etc. I hope you're getting the interpretation now, Ms. Lennox. I want to talk to you about the financial situation of seniors, and I have a question for you. We know that from the outset, there have been measures, emergency assistance measures, that were very welcome and that we supported to support workers and businesses, but yet today, still today, our impression is that seniors are being abandoned. So my first question is this. We are of the view that the Old Age Security, OAS, and all of the programs for seniors should be increased. Those who are eligible for both benefits receive $18,000 per year, less than $2,000 a month. So, Ms. Lennox, is this an issue that's important for you? Ms. Chabot, I think we're having a slight problem with Ms. Lennox's reception. Is Ms. Lennox getting the interpretation?
Is not on the English channel. If it was, you would have simultaneous interpretation.
Yes, I just made that change, so I was able to hear.
Oh, you got the question?
I was able to hear the question, not the preamble, but definitely the question, which is with respect to OAS programs being increased. Great. Actually, it's interesting you raise an important point. We do hear this a lot from our members, and it's something that's come up quite a lot during COVID. The government established $2,000 as the minimum that a family could survive on. For those that had lost employment, they established that $2,000 as the benchmark that would be needed for a family to sustain themselves through COVID-19. But as you know, and as you mentioned, many seniors live on far less than that. CPP, OAS, and in some cases GIS don't amount to $2,000 a month. And so that's something that I know that we've heard, and it's why we're urging the government to follow through on its commitment to increase OAS by 10% and also the CPP survivor benefit, which we know those individuals are most vulnerable because of, often women have had low paying precarious work and don't have as much CPP as, say, a spouse. Did I answer your question?
Merci.
Thank you. And another question in this regard that we often ask. We know that unfortunately, this crisis is going to be hurting businesses. There'll be many bankruptcies. And for an awful lot of workers, what they're counting on is the money that they've set aside for their retirement. Would you agree with the fact that pension funds or retirement funds should be protected with this COVID crisis? Ms. Lennox, the question is for you once again.
It's just better for interpretation.
Yes. So absolutely, we've long advocated for pension protection, particularly for those in corporate defined benefit pensions, through calling for super priority. I think that there's a number of concerns that as we move forward, we may see a series of bankruptcies, which may put people in more. Am I answering your question directly? I'm sorry. Did you try to interject? Okay. So we may see more bankruptcies as a result, and I think the fear is that many pensioners will be left behind and often are at the bottom of the barrel when it comes to the distribution of assets at the end. So that's something. And then with respect to retirement plans, one thing that I would say emphatically that our members are extremely passionate about is the need to eliminate RIF withdrawals. And part of the reason is because it currently in the COVID era, it increases your tax liability. And so this is a real problem for many of our members who are looking to maximize their cash and maximize their flexibility in arranging their affairs at the moment. So we've urged the government, while we welcomed the elimination or the reduction of 25% for RIF withdrawals. This was not applied retroactively, as you know, and then many would like to keep their savings untouched at this time. Thank you.
Merci.
Thank you. Do I still have a bit of time left, Mr. Chairman? 30 seconds. Yes? Yes, 30 seconds. Thank you. My question is now for Ms. Hall. Good evening, Ms. Hall. I heard the plea of your association. I must tell you that each province is facing these problems. Each province will have to give its own accounting with regard to housing, human resources, because you must know that health and social services and human resources, well, that is part and parcel of what falls under the jurisdiction of provinces. And each province must give an accounting of what went well and what was more troubling. What we asked it for, and this was before COVID-19, was the ability of provinces to provide adequate health care services. So I would ask you, would you agree that transfers to provinces for health should be increased, as provinces throughout the country have been asking? They've asked for an increase of at least 100%.
Well, as I had mentioned before, with the aging demographic that we have, I think the provinces are incredibly challenged to provide the level of services that we know that seniors need from a healthcare perspective. And, there is a lot of opportunity, I believe, for that shared responsibility approach, for ongoing collaboration. And I know that provinces have been asking for additional funding, and we believe that there is a very strong conversation that is required for that. There's many opportunities for collaboration on development of a pan-Canadian human resource strategy to look at how can we support modern infrastructure development that best supports seniors in care today. And there's a multitude of other opportunities, I think, that can happen when we have the opportunity to sit down and figure out a strategy that best supports seniors across the country.
Thank you, Ms. Hall. Ms. Kwan now for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our witnesses. My question is to Ms. Lennox. One of the key issues that I know seniors are concerned about is with respect to interruptions to their GIS. Even though the government has extended the deadline for them to file their taxes, some are still likely not going to be able to meet that deadline. Would you then support for the government to grandfather all seniors receiving GIS automatically for the year 2020-21? Sorry, we're not hearing you yet.
I'm sorry about this. It might be my audio. Can you hear me now?
Yes,
fine.
Thank you.
Okay. Yes, we would. That would be something that we would absolutely support, particularly those that are on GIS. They're our most vulnerable. And so grandfathering it is something that we would fundamentally support, yes.
The other thing that I've asked of the government is that to make sure seniors who might be receiving emergency benefits during this COVID period, that those benefits not be counted toward their income for the purposes of calculating GIS next year. Can you comment on that, please?
It's an interesting proposal. I'd not considered it, but it sounds like a very good one because, as I said, people on GIS are in the lowest income bracket and could use a number of supports right now at the time. So I think that would be a positive step forward for the government to take. Absolutely.
Thank you very much. There's no question, as you've indicated already, seniors on these fixed incomes are not being recognized by the government to be in need of support during this COVID period. As such, they have not come in with what would be a much simpler approach, and that is a direct universal benefit for all, and that would capture senior students and everybody else instead of the complicated system to which we have today. I appreciate your comments on that. I now want to just turn to the long-term care issue to which both witnesses have touched on. There's no question throughout this pandemic it's been highlighted in terms of the failures of the system for our seniors in the long-term care facility. One of the issue, of course, is that we see a stark difference between the private long-term care facilities versus the not-for-profit long-term care facilities. And so to that end, I wonder, Ms. Lennox, if you can comment on, would you support a national, you've already spoke to it, but national standards that should be established in the care guarantee? What would that entail?
So you raise obviously a very hot debate at the moment, and that's in part because of the STARS investigation. This weekend, we saw that for-profit nursing homes have 4 times as many COVID deaths as city-run homes. In many ways, this isn't a surprise. There have been numerous studies around the world comparing for-profit and not-for-profit homes and municipally run homes, and generally the trend is that for-profit homes tend to perform poorer, and you can see why this might be the case because of increased pressure, obviously, to turn a profit. One of the biggest budget line items is staffing, and in the absence of clear ratios or numbers of hours per resident, this is often the first thing that does get cut. Food budgets are another thing we know are absolutely deplorable in these long-term care settings. But we do know that there are both good and bad examples in private as well as public long-term care homes. And so it speaks to your comment about a national standard. At a minimum, I think part of the go forward is that we have to ensure that all provincial and territorial jurisdictions align their health workforce in these facilities to be consistent in terms of qualifications, credentials, specialization, even staff ratios. And then even when you reflect back on how some of the homes performed, why was it that in BC, care workers stopped working at multiple homes 2 weeks before care workers in Ontario and in Quebec? These are some of the questions that I think really need answering. And it's possible that had the federal government, stepped in a greater leadership way, I understand provincial and federal jurisdictional challenges, but had there been some sort of standard in place that ensures best practices, we might have seen a better performance.
Well, with part of the standard that could be established that would apply for all provinces and territories is to bring long-term care under the Canada Health Act.
Yeah. I think that that's a really important point. If you look at the true definition of long-term care, and every province categorizes it differently, but if you require the highest level of institutional long-term care, that is a health service, and frankly, should be treated no different than a hospital. And in that case, it should be part of the Canada Health Act. So I think that there's real merit to deeming long-term care facilities as hospitals under the Canada Health Act. Because as I said, when you look at the characteristics of patients in these facilities, that is what these facilities are really operating as. And ultimately, that would bring long-term care up to hospital standards. So better infection and prevention control, nursing, staffing, training, education standards, and it would become part of the envelope of federal financial transfers under the Canada Health Act. And I think that would be great.
Well, thank you very much for that. And I would venture to say, actually, on the private versus for-profit long-term care facilities, even in British Columbia, we notice a significant difference. A lot of our long-term care facilities in British Columbia, previous to a Liberal provincial government taking over, those were in fact not-for-profit agencies, and it switched over with the staffing that went into a private sort of an approach to it. And even then, we saw the difference in terms of the impact for seniors. So full disclosure, the NDP call for long-term care facilities to be fully in the nonprofit regime. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kwan. Next, we have Ms. Falk, please, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Just so you note, I will be sharing my time with Ms. Jansen. So I want to again thank all the witnesses for all of your comments. We do know that COVID-19 has without a doubt put a strain on the social services and resources available to support Canadians. And as it's been mentioned, it has exposed the fragility of many existing resources, and our seniors have certainly been impacted by many of these gaps. I have had many heartbreaking conversations with constituents during this health crisis who are in desperate situations. One constituent who has called my office was having difficulty getting groceries because of social distancing measures. Because of his disability, he is dependent on getting a ride into a neighboring town to get groceries. And a lot of organizations are filling these gaps for seniors, and the government has provided for funding to some of these large national organizations, but the reality is that these national organizations do not have the same reach in rural Canada. The riding I represent is made up of many small rural communities, and the challenges in our rural communities differ greatly from urban centers. We know in bigger cities, especially those like Ottawa, it's easy to take for granted internet access, stable mobile networks, or even quick access to grocery stores. And the closure of Service Canada offices has forced Canadians in rural communities to depend on phone and internet connections that frankly aren't reliable that much as well. And I also just want to make a note that this government increased the carbon tax during this health crisis, a tax that unfairly punishes rural Canadians. And for seniors on a fixed income, this is one more money out of their pocket. So an issue that I've been hearing about is pharmacy dispensing fees. I've heard from many seniors in my riding who live in these smaller communities that need to drive into a bigger community to get their prescription filled and groceries, etc. So many of these seniors budget their trips to town because it's costly to drive in and to do their errands. And that being said, many seniors usually get their prescriptions filled every 3 months to save on trips to town and pharmacy dispensing fees. So my question is for Carp. I'm wondering if you've heard of similar situations like this, and I'm going to assume that it's not just in Saskatchewan that we're experiencing this.
No, it's right across the country. Actually, a number of the Atlantic provinces have taken steps to go back to that 90-day, and Manitoba recently did as well. I can honestly say since the beginning, since the Canadian Pharmacists Association came out with that recommendation, we've received countless emails and calls from CART members who say that these additional costs are unaffordable and unsustainable, and they fear having to make additional trips to pharmacies. And also keep in mind, many pharmacies don't open during seniors hours. So a number of seniors hours at grocery stores, say you were to visit Loblaws, the seniors hours are fairly early, whereas maybe a pharmacy may not open until 9. So they're making additional trips on top of that. So, this is sort of part of the out-of-pocket expense I mentioned in the beginning, that seniors are being required to incur as a result of COVID. And in this case, it's fully attributed to the co-payments that are related to these prescriptions. People are being required to pay 3 times the amount of co-payment, which is significant with what we know about our members. They are super users when it comes to prescription medications. Many take, on average, 4 prescription medications, with some taking more than 10. So these costs do add up, and they add up quickly. And we do know that the results of this has meant that many seniors have had to make very difficult decisions about whether or not to put food on the table or pay for essential medicines. So we've actually urged
Ms.
all
Lennox,
provincial.
I'm so short for time. I just want to make sure Ms. Jansen has an opportunity to ask a question as well.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you. Ms. Hall, a few weeks ago, I was alerted to a tragic situation that a young man, Roger Foley, was struggling with. Roger has cerebellar ataxia, currently being cared for in hospital in Ontario. Now, Roger needs an intense amount of care due to his physical limitations and struggles with very basic things like swallowing and shifting from his bed to a sling. Roger is completely dependent on healthcare workers for his very life. When the hospital informed him that they were going to transfer him from hospital to a care home due to COVID-19, Roger became incredibly distressed. New caregivers, new routines, new lodgings, these are all things that are a real challenge for the severely disabled. Continuity of care helps them feel they have some semblance of control over their bodily autonomy. As you can imagine, as the hospital shifted, Roger began to despair. His new caregivers were not easily able to adapt to his particular needs, trying to force him to agree to procedures which would make his care easier on the nurses. For example, pressuring him to have a G-tube inserted rather than allowing him to eat independently with the help of a nurse. Is this endemic in long-term care, the idea of putting efficiencies of care ahead of the needs of the autonomy of the disabled patient, whose life is completely in the hands of the caregiver and who has very little capacity to refuse?
We're out of time. If you can keep your answer very short, please.
Okay. Well, that's a hard one to answer very quick in a very short, succinct answer. Obviously, the welfare of an individual resident is absolutely the key priority. I obviously can't speak to the full circumstances of an individual, and I'm sorry to hear that that has been the experience. But care for individuals is overseen by a physician, and care is highly regulated. Along with the funding that goes to these care homes across the country. They are highly regulated, inspected, licensed, and there's great oversight to the care provision and to the finances provided for the care offered to these homes for the care of individuals. So I'm sorry to hear of the circumstance. It's difficult to address with a very individual specific example, but that is not certainly reflective of a standard of care in long-term care.
Thank you, Ms. Hall. Et le dernier,
And the last MP to ask a question will be Mr. Lauzon.
Oui.
Yes, thank you. My question is for Ms. Lennox. At least 3 times during your answers, you mentioned the fact that the federal government could have done more, either in participation with provinces or by providing PPE. You stated that we didn't intervene quickly enough. So I have a very simple question for you before moving to the main question. The jurisdiction for health and long-term care, are you aware of the fact that this falls under the provinces and territories?
Vous savez aussi que
Yes, do you also know that we invest a lot when we talk about PPE? You mentioned the fact that we depend upon China. We invested $2 billion in PPE. We invested in the private sector. Are you aware of the fact that there are Canadian companies here in Canada that converted their plants to produce this necessary equipment?
Yes, I do. I'm familiar with that. And I was, thank you to the federal government for that investment of $2 billion. I remember it well. It was in March.
Okay.
Very well, but how then can you justify the fact that in a crisis such as this one, within the span of 3 months, well, we invested in Canadian businesses, we supplied the provinces, and you also mentioned that we didn't give more equipment to long-term care facilities. But you also know that this falls under the jurisdiction of the provinces. We supplied the provinces. What indications have you received that the provinces didn't receive what they required from the federal government?
I think, the purpose of my statement was to really emphasize the need for greater federal and provincial cooperation. I am quite familiar with the fact that provincial governments and territorial governments are responsible for the delivery of healthcare. What I would urge is better cooperation. With respect to this pandemic, we do know that there were shortages in long-term care facilities with respect to accessing PPE. We do know that many healthcare workers were not equipped with the necessary PPE to keep them safe. And the consequence of that was that this virus spread. And also many care workers were fearful of showing up to work. And that meant that there were, it contributed to the chronic staffing shortages right across the country. So I think my point was really to emphasize the need for better planning and preparation.
I didn't want to talk about the shortage of human resources. I was talking about PPE. You mentioned this 3 times. If Quebec is the most affected province in Canada, and if the government of Quebec was able to respond to the need for equipment for healthcare workers, how can you base yourself on other provinces when Quebec was able to provide to its healthcare establishments all of the equipment they needed?
So I think it was variable in many provinces. PPE, even testing is something that was variable. It kind of depends on the jurisdiction. So I'm not, making a blanket statement right across the country. I know, some provinces had difficulty even getting consistent testing across the province, and certainly access to PPE was variable too. I think Ontario is unfortunately the best example of this problem. Some provinces performed better than others. So, for example, PEI in March had no testing capacity, and at the end of April could do 2,000 per day. So I don't know that I'm answering your question, but I think access to these types of essentials is variable depending on the province.
Et vous savez que le Québec.
And you are aware of the fact that Quebec asked for the Canadian Army to provide assistance in long-term care facilities, and we intervened quickly. And now, do you think that our government would have better managed this crisis by not respecting the jurisdiction of provinces and territories? If our Prime Minister had decided to go over provincial and territorial jurisdiction, do you think the crisis would have been better managed in that way, going over their heads?
Certainly not. I respect our Constitution. I respect that provincial, territorial, federal jurisdictional the difference between them. But I do think that there is an opportunity for more collaboration, particularly during a pandemic, for the government to work together collaboratively with the provinces to ensure these essential supplies are there.
Thank you, Ms. Lennox. Merci, Monsieur Lauzon.
Thank you, Mr. Lauzon.
The appointed hour, I would like to say thank you very much to the witnesses for being with us, for your testimony, and for answering the questions. And thank you very much to my colleagues. We will see you, I expect, on Friday. We're adjourned. Thank you.